Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to cover. We're going to be talking about Michael Cohen a little bit later on. A few things left about protesters on college campuses. Joe Biden's Israel policy. We'll talk about that as well. A few things here in general about polls and the presidential race, some local issues. First off, receiving a comment after the broadcast yesterday. I find it curious that Fox News and Newsmax don't pan the audience at the Trump rallies. Why is that? Well, I'm not going to go conspiratorial here because I actually, maybe it's more of a logistics type scenario. So I've been to two rallies in the media section, two Trump rallies, one in Las Vegas, one in Rochester. And so I have the kind of the perspective of being in the area where these media outlets are set up. And I think very often it's because they're either at ground level, so you can't really pan that great, or they're on risers, but again, making it difficult technology-wise to pan because you've got to figure you're right up on top of other media people, and it's not as easy as you may think to get that audience view. Now, I know if you look at what happened in New Jersey, 100,000 people attended. I don't know how they could show that kind of crowd and do it justice. I think it might actually come off looking worse if you're just at head level trying to get everybody. I did see that amazing, I think it was a video or maybe it's just a picture from New York Post, who was a part of the plane ride in with the former president, and seeing the mass of people getting closer to the stage was pretty remarkable. So I'm not going to go conspiratorial there at all. I don't think that's the case at all. I think it really is a logistics thing. Because if you look very often, no matter what outlet, it is focused on Trump. So that's just my 2 cents. You can, of course, write in at any point and disagree. Here's an update on a story. As always, we talk about the need to find out who you're voting for. And this is the prime example is the super mayor. This is not the super mayor, but this is Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Durley, who yelled at that police officer. You know the story. We've talked about it quite frequently, and right down the road in Monroe County. Well, here is an update coming from Rochester First. A virtual town hall was held yesterday evening to discuss the potential removal of Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Durley from office. The meeting comes after Durley was captured on body-worn camera, arguing with a police officer and refusing his commands. She refused to pull over when an officer tried stopping her, and she was given a speeding ticket and paid $183. Yes, she was going, 20 miles over the speed limit? Local advocacy group Save Rochester used Monday's town hall to bring attention to what they say are disparities between minorities and those in positions of power. Many at the meeting said this was a clear abuse of power and urged the governor to step in and use her powers to oust Durley. Defense attorneys and advocates have been calling for her resignation ever since the video went viral. Now, she has stated that she will not step down. The virtual meeting held by Save Rochester is the second after protesters took to the streets of the city of Rochester. Durley has since apologized for the incident, admitting she did not treat the police officer with respect. And you've heard about the various investigations that are being done. The virtual town hall was open to the public to attend. So no new updates. It sounds like it was more of a grassroots organization putting this on and not necessarily anything of official business. But we'll keep you updated on her story because it is pretty fascinating. A couple of oddball stories to kick off the program. That was one of them. Another, the New York State Assembly Democrats will be facing the New York State Assembly Republicans, in a softball game presented by the food pantries of the Capital District. It's going to take place on Wednesday, May 29th, if this is something that interests you. Athletes at their finest. It'll be at Joseph Bruno Stadium. Carl's Crushers will take on Barclays Bombers. Good names, Carl Hasty, Will Barclay. The game is free to attend, but donations are suggested and sponsorships are available. So we'll maybe keep you updated on that. There's some oddball stories. How do you like that to kick off the program? There is a mixed bag on Michael Cohen's testimony yesterday. If you read, kind of a biased outlet like CNN, boy, it was a nail in the coffin. The walls are closing in on Trump. How many times have we heard that, by the way? If you seem to go to more level-headed people, there's some back and forth on what was actually said yesterday and what this actually means about a case that has so many questions, such as what is the crime? Anyway, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. Feel free to weigh in on all the issues of the day. I do have a couple of updates when it comes to college campuses and the protests there and what that means. Also about, like I said, the Israel and the policy of the Biden administration. First, kind of starting off with sports, let's say. Oh, the waves are coming in. Thank you. Did you see about the Kansas City Chiefs kicker, Harrison Butker? This coming from the New York Post. He was asked to speak at Benedictine College at the commencement ceremony. He said, as a group, you witness firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society. While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values and media, all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Our nation, this is, again, if you're just joining us, Kansas City Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker. It'll be interesting to see how the team responds. But anyway, or the NFL responds. But he said, our nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. Now, if you recall when that happened, it was bizarre when the president did that. He has been so vocal, I'll continue. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to too many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. The NFL player urged the new grads to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition. Wow. It'll be interesting to see how the NFL responds to that, speaking at that Catholic university at commencement. A little different than some of the other commencement speeches that we've been seeing. I'm not sure what kind of backlash there will be from the NFL and from Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, I don't know how that was necessarily a sports update. When we come back, let me do one more story before we go to break, because I'm rushing through some of the things before we get into the nitty-gritty this morning. We have plenty of time, 2 hours on the broadcast. This coming from our Congressman Nick Langworthy. He has introduced the GRAPE Act. The Grape Research and Protection Expansion Act, known as GRAPE Act. This critical legislation aims to provide comprehensive crop insurance for grape growers who suffer losses due to freeze events, addressing a significant gap in current agricultural support policies. This is what the congressman had to say. Grape growers in western New York and the southern tier are vital to our local economy and our nation's agricultural sector. The GRAPE Act will ensure that they have the necessary resources to recover from the devastating impact of unexpected freezes. In April, the Lake Erie grape belt experienced a hard frost, causing substantial damage that threatened the entire crop, resulting in major financial losses for local producers. Because of this, I am committed to fighting for the inclusion of this provision in the upcoming Farm Bill to provide grape growers across the United States with affordable crop insurance, safeguarding their livelihoods, and ensuring the continued success of our agricultural communities. We bring you all the news of the day here, folks. The GRAPE Act will mandate the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation to develop a policy specifically for insuring table, wine, and juice grapes against losses due to freeze events, require ongoing research to ensure the insurance policy is robust, effective, and meets the unique needs of grape growers, and provide grape growers with an affordable safety net, reducing the financial impact of freeze-related losses. Do you know what's interesting? The Congressman's office put together a little background on grape production in our area, and this is in the 23rd Congressional District. New York's 23 has over 130,000 acres of insured land. New York is the nation's second largest Concord grape producer, and the Lake Erie Concord Belt is the oldest and largest Concord grape growing region in the world. Our grape industry alone contributes 9,597 jobs to our economy. That includes tourism and similar jobs created by our local vineyards. So there we go. We covered a little bit of everything to start the morning off. When we get back, we're going to talk about protests, and then we're going to get into all the other issues of the day, kind of wrap up. I know we've been spending a lot of time on them, but I do think it's important. Some have suggested that they're fading away. I don't believe that to be the case, and I'll give you some examples of that. So stay with us. This is, frankly speaking, just getting started here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. We got a couple comments here. First of all, while we were talking about the GRAPE Act from Congressman Langworthy, one thing I wanted to mention, he also sent a letter to the U.S. Department of Agriculture Secretary Vilsack urging the approval of New York State's disaster declaration from the April 25th freeze experienced by Western New York grape growers. To give you, and this is also supported by Farm Credit East. We received a comment from a viewer. There are no grapes on the vines in April. How do you think ice wines are made? They have to wait for a first hard freeze like Granny Smith apples. That bill is another waste of taxpayer dollars. Bet this isn't red. Shouldn't have bet. I don't know why you think there's some nefarious thing that I was going to censor you. Okay, I think we've read a lot of comments that go against things that I maybe have said in the past. Okay, that was on Congressman Langworthy. That was his bill. So if you are a farmer out there and you would like to weigh in, I'd love to hear from you as well, or on any of these topics. Okay, so in Columbia, we didn't mention this yesterday. We talked a little bit about the protests during graduation, and it was inevitable. I mean, what a perfect place to get the most attention that you can, as we look at some of the narcissistic ways these protests are being done, driving people's egos. What a better place than in front of your fellow students and their parents and loved ones to show that you care the most, that you are the most anti-Israel out of anyone in the graduating class. This one is strange. First of all, in Columbia University, a lot of the graduates wore zip tie handcuffs, kind of showing that some of them have been arrested or, whatever the case may be. But the real weird one is someone actually went as so far to tear up their diploma on stage during the commencement ceremony last week. What is that proof? What is that going to bring peace to the Middle East? Why is Columbia, where you spent a lot of money for that piece of paper, what is that at the end of the day going to prove? How is that going to end anything happening in Palestine? The protesting students were caught on camera storming across the platform on Friday to accept their degrees during ceremonies that were significantly pared back after weeks of violent anti-Israel demonstrations on campus. In one of the most belligerent displays, Tarsis Salom, a Columbia social work graduate, charged forward with her zip-tied hands above her head as those in the audience cheered her on. Remember, this is a fad in many ways. So yes, they're cheering her on because this is a cool thing to do. You can't be seen not cheering the anti-Israel protests, or then you will be ostracized. You will be a social pariah. And it's happening to celebrities, which is always a fascinating thing with these kind of woke issues. If a celebrity doesn't say enough, they get in just as much trouble if they say something. So if they're not out speaking kind of the same anti-Israel rhetoric, the same anti-Semitic rhetoric, if they're not tweeting that out, or if they're not saying it at award ceremonies, they're just keeping quiet, minding their own business, they are very much like the students on campus that aren't doing anything and being intimidated, being attacked. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So then Tarsis Salom faced the crowd and abruptly tore up her diploma to shreds. So she just outdid everybody else. She proved that she was the coolest one at school, that she was the biggest protester in school. I cannot imagine, first of all, maybe she's paying for her own education. But let's say it was a parent or a loved one paying for that education. How outraged would you be that she ripped up her diploma? Now, I think many of the kind of jaded people out there, myself included, would say she can probably get another copy. But will she? Anyway, that's, I guess, one way to protest, ripping up your, what was it, $80,000 a year on average to get that degree from Columbia, and ripping up that diploma in protest. Now, UNC, this is kind of an example. Be careful what you wish for with these protesters. UNC has now slashed their diversity program because they needed the funding for public safety resources. As North Carolina's public university system considered a vote on changing its diversity policy, the system's flagship university board voted Monday to cut funding for diversity programs in next year's budget. UNC Board of Trustees approved a change that would divert $2.3 million of diversity spending from state funds to go towards public safety and policing at a special meeting to address the university's budget. Yeah, I mean, this isn't free. The security issues, these protests are costing the schools. So it could end up in the loss of the diversity office. UNC will join the ranks of other notable public universities that have stripped diversity spending, such as the University of Florida in Gainesville, which announced in a March memo it was reallocating funds to faculty recruitment. But unlike UF, which implemented its funding rollback after the state legislature passed a bill banning diversity program spending at state universities, UNC set the tone on funding cuts before the North Carolina legislature stepped in. We're going ahead and, sort of taking a leadership role in this. That's the way I view it, said Budget Chair Dave Bullock. The change would go into effect starting 2024-2025 fiscal year on July the 1st. The Diversity Office, get this, you want to talk about a lot of money being spent. The Diversity Office has 12 staff members, including a chief diversity officer, according to its website. The budget, which includes the $2.3 million amendment, will now be submitted to the University of North Carolina Board of Governors. Now, that puts them in an awkward situation because they don't want to be looked at as cutting. Certain members of that community will not want to look like they're cutting this diversity program. But it is an unintended consequence of these protests, right? It's because they need to keep the universities, and it says here, quote, safe from a larger threat. It's important to consider the needs of all 30,000 students, not just the 100 or so that may want to disrupt the university's operations. It takes away resources from others. Yes, so many people have suffered because of the 100 or so protesters, and it's changed graduations. It's caused how many disruptions to public safety? How many kids, I shouldn't say kids, how many students feared for their life going on college campuses, especially Jewish students, because of the loud, very vocal agitators. Here in New York, SUNY's chancellor, John King, said, we're paying close attention to issues of safety, so there may be ways that graduations look a little different as we try to make sure that there are joyous events for our students. It's really important that we have a traditional graduation season for these students who deserve that celebration of their work. So they're keeping an eye on things. Now, if you look at SUNY New Paltz, that was, last weekend or 2 weeks ago, when 74 students, 10 alumni, and 2 current employees were arrested there. So may look a little bit different. May look non-typical. Again, this is what's kind of heartbreaking about it, especially for the people that have not participated in these protests. Many of them are the same students that didn't have a normal high school graduation because of COVID, now graduating what is, as some people have said, kind of the highlight of your life up to that point, and not being able to celebrate it the way it should be because of 100 or so agitators whose goal is to make others feel uncomfortable and to show that they are the most woke. When we come back, this is not the whole topic for today. I want to talk a little bit about the celebrities facing a backlash over their silence on this, because that's an interesting cog, if you will, in this woke machine. So that's coming up after this. Got some comments coming in. Keep them coming in. You see the number on the bottom of your screen, 607-358-3131. And we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. And we are back broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street Corning. Yes, thank you. I apologize for the black screen there for a little bit. The break came up a little bit short, and that's how the computer handles that. I'm not sure. I'm going to look into that during our next break. So thank you. Anytime you see a technical issue, please let me know. A comment from a viewer. What a great idea to pull money from the diversity funding. Maybe they'll think a little bit harder before they disrupt the university. Pay to play justice. I do think that they're so selfish that at the end of the day, and I agree with you, that it's a kind of an interesting consequence of this, but I don't think these protesters care. If they don't care about intimidating their fellow students, specifically the Jewish community, if they don't care about ruining graduation ceremonies, I don't think they really care about next year's students and the students in the future. They're looking out for number one. It's a very selfish protest in the way this has all been handled. Now, as I mentioned, celebrities have this, and it's a really weird scenario that happens with this woke culture. So if you're a celebrity, you say, you know what, I'm going to keep out of this one. Middle East policy. This may not be my wheelhouse because I sing music. I sing songs. I play guitar, whatever the case may be. Maybe I'm not the foreign policy expert that the world needs right now. Well, if that's your attitude, it's almost worse than saying something. Because remember, silence is violence, we've heard in the past. That if you're not out there screaming the same woke taglines as these protesters, you're a part of the problem. Celebrities who have remained silent on the crisis in Gaza are feeling the wrath of angry fans wielding what they call the, quote, digital guillotine to block them on social media and streaming platforms. Taylor Swift, Drake, and many more have become targets of the Block Out 2024 movement. It's in response to this perceived disconnect between the glamorous Met Gala and the grim realities of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Yeah, the Met Gala was one of the instances where they wanted to protest, and police did a good job of keeping them away because it's celebrities. Of course they would. But the Met Gala, the optics of, I think, the Met Gala at any time is not the best. For months, pro-Palestinian activists, anti-Israel activists, have flooded the comment sections of social media sites, urging stars to join calls for a ceasefire in Gaza's deadliest war. You know, the same kind of ceasefire that was in effect on October 6th, that kind of ceasefire. I'm not going to go through all this. It's just an interesting place for these celebrities because they very much have brought this on themselves. They are social justice warriors when it's beneficial to them. They're very outspoken when they know it'll get them a lot of attention, a lot of media coverage, earned media, free media. For one instance, and I never thought anybody would turn on her if you watch the news, global music superstar Taylor Swift has seen a decline of more than 200,000 followers since last Thursday. This is about lives and justice. If she can rally all of us to vote, she has the power to speak up about injustice, said one TikToker who describes herself as Palestinian Swiftie. It's uncertain whether the movement is directly responsible for the social media hits seen by some celebrities or if other trends are at play. Yeah, well, you got to be careful, too, because if you come out and you do speak out on this and you say the same kind of anti-Semitic talking points, it won't be enough. It never is. Ask some of these celebrities that have become outspoken after these pressure campaigns, and then others turn on them for different reasons, or they dive into their past and say, oh, look at this troubling aspect. Just interesting. It's an interesting place to be. Here's a good comment. Nancy Pelosi, professor of Tantrum Class 101, must be proud of the courageous diploma ripper. What a great point. Because that same attitude, right? Nancy Pelosi ripping up the State of the Union speech by then President Donald Trump in what was a temper tantrum. Very similar, very akin to what we saw with the Columbia protester who, while wearing zip-tied handcuffs, ripped up her diploma in a show of, support for Hamas. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what the end game was there. We'll never know, but wouldn't it be fascinating to see if her or her family reaches out to the university and asks for a copy of the diploma? I don't believe you're walking away after all that time, effort, money, and not get that diploma, no matter how worked up you are about this protest. Now, Glenn Reynolds, how am I doing on time? I'm doing good. Glenn Reynolds says the campus protests may be winding down, but don't worry, now the really expensive and destructive phase begins, the litigation. I don't know. Let's see what he has to say. This warms my heart, but then as a law professor, I'm basically in the business of selling law degrees. The campus protesters, and to some degree the universities where they protested, seem to have thought that the law didn't apply to their actions. Well, why would they? I mean, they did not expect any kind of repercussions. And that's at every level. The faculty, the students who were protesting and the faculty who were protesting, the universities themselves. And I keep pointing to the fact that I honestly believe that even if you weren't a protester, this really negatively affects you, because when you go out into the real world trying to get a job and you hand that resume in and say you graduated from Columbia in the class of 2024, do you believe that that's going to be looked at positively, or if that's a stigma now? I believe personally it'll be a stigma to some of these big, whatever it is, hedge funds, businesses, you name it. But I'll continue. They are likely to discover they were wrong, that there will be consequences. The union representing Columbia's custodians is planning to sue over the university's indifference and negligence regarding the safety of its members who were trapped and made captives in the student seizure of Hamilton Hall. Great. I'm glad that's happening. I hope that Jewish students also are able to sue because of the intimidation factor by these protesters who are students and faculty. Remember that. Made to feel unsafe, intimidated, threats of violence, these type of things. Transport Workers Union boss John Samuelson told Fox News they stormed in, but two of the custodians had to fight their way out. They were explicitly told, "You're staying here, you're not going anywhere. This cause is bigger than you." See, again, they know everything. It goes back to that line that I quote so often, that these young people go to school now not to learn, but to teach. This issue is bigger than you, so you're staying in this protest with us. It is that narcissism. It is that the world revolves around me attitude, and my emotions and my feelings are the most important thing that anybody should be dealing with. Hence the reason why words have been related to violence, because if you say something, even accidentally, that's no different than me punching you. If you're offended by something I said, it's no different than me punching you in their mind. That's how they talk about the words violence. So that makes it okay for them to actually get physically violent. It's a weird world we're living in, but I'll continue. Samuelson described the mob as smarmy, sort of entitled, spoiled, bratty occupiers who treated the blue-collar workers with contempt and tried to keep them from going home to their families. Speaking of that contempt, and speaking of the viewer who mentioned Nancy Pelosi, I've got a piece here a little bit later on that's in line with that too, that kind of looking down your nose at certain people. And that's exactly what we see here. You have as they said, spoiled, bratty occupiers who are demanding that these blue-collar workers give up time with their family and stay there with them. Columbia showed an epic disregard and epically failed to protect the workforce. The union may be planning to sue the protesters too, as it is working to gather security camera footage and the names of students arrested during the campus riots. And that may just be the beginning. George Washington University law professor John Banzhaf, who pioneered the class action litigation against tobacco companies, predicts that there will be more lawsuits against the protesters and their backers. If DAs won't prosecute, victims can sue for false imprisonment. Such class action lawsuits could be brought for familiar torts, civil damage actions, such as assault and battery, false imprisonment, and torturous interference with existing contractual advantage, as well as less familiar ones, such as civil conspiracy, and I don't even know how to say this, prime facie tort. These victims include not only students and faculty on campus, but people who were trapped in their cars by road-blocked protests, causing them to miss things like flights or work or medical appointments. It only takes one such person to launch a class action suit on behalf of others that are affected. Banzhaf notes that the protesters aren't afraid of arrest, since friendly district attorneys like Manhattan's Alvin Bragg generally follow a catch and release policy. Yeah, they knew that there wasn't going to be any kind of repercussion for this, or at least they thought so. And I'm still not convinced there will be. But lawsuits can go on for years, wrecking credit ratings, hurting employment prospects, and producing endless legal fees. I've wondered for a while why these actions haven't happened more often, but I think things might be about to change. I note that some of the civil rights statutes that are implicated provide for generous attorney's fees, potentially attracting plaintiffs' lawyers. It's not just the protesters who are at risk. Their deep pocket backers may also be implicated, and for even deeper pockets, the universities are at risk too. Columbia law professor Joshua Mitz says Columbia violated the civil rights of Jewish students by fostering and tolerating a hostile education environment on campus. the sort of severe and pervasive harassment experienced by Jewish students who are told to go back to Europe is forbidden by federal civil rights laws, and universities are required to take steps to prevent it, which, as we are well aware, Columbia clearly did not do. Columbia could lose federal funding if found liable, and although it is a private university, it's heavily dependent on federal money for research, student loans, and financial aid. Nor is it just Columbia. While the events were worse there, and as far as I know, no custodians were ever taken prisoner elsewhere, Jewish students and faculty and others suffered similar severe and pervasive harassment, as well as threats of violence and sometimes actual attacks on other campuses like Harvard, Yale, and Penn. These universities will likely face civil rights lawsuits as well, as will protesters at those schools, of whom there were a lot, who stepped over the line of peaceful protests. This could be a sort of full employment act for civil rights lawyers. Some would call this overkill and argue that idealistic protesters shouldn't face litigation for too much enthusiasm. But calling for Jews to be killed or deported hardly counts as idealistic. And I have no doubt that a group of KKK members telling black students to leave while smashing into campus buildings would garner no such sympathy. Nor would the university have been so slow to react. As Wilford Brimley's character says in the movie Absence of Malice, wonderful thing, subpoenas. There are likely to be a lot of them flying on campus. We'll probably learn a lot, and so will the people behind the protests. That's Glenn Harlan Reynolds, professor of law at the University of Tennessee. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it, the repercussion that some of these students will experience. It ties in with, and again, you know my prediction, or I don't even know if it's a prediction, that it's not just going to be contained on college campuses. We've seen that with bridges being shut down. I've got a couple other examples. This isn't going to be our whole topic because we've got a lot to get to, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Our beautiful view overlooking Market Street from the roof here at the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. You are watching Frankly Speaking. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, the protests are going to obviously spread out now that schools are closing down for the summer. Mitch McConnell has asked Secret Service to widen the security area at the GOP convention in Milwaukee, saying, "I'm deeply concerned about reports that the security perimeter around the Republican convention site in Milwaukee may be creating a likely and preventable area of conflict between protesters and convention attendees and delegates," the Kentucky Republican wrote in a letter to Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle. As you know, this year has been a very challenging one for protests in the United States. We must all take seriously that tensions are high and do our best to balance the right to express dissent while also keeping convention attendees as safe as possible. Now, we talk about, well, okay, let me before I mention Nancy Pelosi, because I don't know if you saw what Nancy Pelosi had to say just recently, but this disdain for average Americans. We talked about it with the protesters, where these elitist, kind of snobby, narcissistic kids bullying, if you will, the custodian staff. Same kind of attitude coming from Nancy Pelosi. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, the New York Post has a really good piece, and this piggybacks off of what we're seeing from the protesters. Because yesterday we learned that we knew what we already knew, that the UN numbers were lies. I mean, essentially propaganda coming from Hamas, that the death toll was almost 50% fewer than what was being reported. And I don't even know if I believe those numbers. But remember, this propaganda, this press releases that the Hamas sends out, and our media and our Democratic politicians feel free in sharing them as if they're gospel, as if they're fact. But I want to talk about specifically what President Biden did on top of everything else he's been doing in regards to Israel. It's official, says the New York Post editorial board. President Biden's policy on Israel makes no sense except as a sudden, all-out drive to stop the war completely, leaving Hamas plenty of time to recover. The Washington Post reports, citing 4 sources, get this, that the White House has offered Jerusalem, quote, sensitive intelligence to help the Israeli military pinpoint the location of Hamas leaders and find the group's hidden tunnels, end quote. If, there's an if, because wouldn't you want to do that? Hey, we'll help you find Hamas. So you can pinpoint exactly where those leaders are and where those tunnels are. But only if the IDF doesn't go full scale into Rafah. So this is President Biden's don't. So why not hand the info over ASAP, as soon as humanly possible? It would help the IDF target those leaders now and make the precision strikes the White House says it wants more likely. It's not like Israel wants to take the casualties of a full-on assault. It doesn't have to. And this follows the freeze in many munitions the Pentagon was about to send over, including precision bombs, which are also beyond helpful for precision strikes. This is the failed policy of the Biden administration, who is twisting itself up into pretzels to try to figure out the best way not to scare off the anti-Semitic portion of his party, those votes. So he's caving to these protesters. And that's why I say it, and it's heartbreaking to say, but why I do believe that the protesters won in many ways, because they've got this failed policy to be enacted by the president. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is suddenly touting a new report claiming Israel's use of U.S.-provided weapons in Gaza likely violated international humanitarian law. With zero public details on what weapons used when and where, nor how any law was violated, plus what international humanitarian law is exactly. Those things did not come up. As for the totality of the damage that's been done to children, women, men, what hard info does Blinken pretend Washington has on that, when it's basically impossible to learn while the war is still on? The whole assessment was plainly cooked up for talking points. Notably, the United Nations just stopped treating the victim counts by the Hamas-ran Gazan Health Authority as meaning anything. A wise move, as those numbers were plainly made up from the start. And yet, Joe Biden and others quoting those numbers. These protesters quoting those numbers from a Hamas propaganda wing. Meanwhile, the consensus count of civilians fleeing Rafah has hit 360,000. More than a fifth of the number estimated to be there just a week or so ago. So the humanitarian case for keeping the IDF out keeps weakening, even as the need to let Israel greatly ease delivery of aid by completing its main combat actions by finishing off the last Hamas battalions and leaders now hold up in Rafah grows. Other grim news. Biden apparently decided on his new Israel-bashing approach well in advance of his Holocaust Remembrance Day remarks, but held off on any public steps until he'd given that speech, which, bizarrely, made an excellent case for why Israel must destroy Hamas. None of this makes sense, except as a strategy for appeasing the pro-Hamas protesters, because Joe thinks he'll lose in November if he doesn't, while creating excuses that some Israel supporters might buy for abandoning our ally. It's beyond despicable, and yet another gross violation of the president's oath of office. Election day can't come fast enough, says the New York Post editorial board. All right, when we come back, a little bit about Nancy Pelosi, a few other things running just a tad bit late, so stay with us. We'll be right back. And frankly speaking, here at WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street. We do not have a Steuben's Senior Services Fund interview lined up for you today, but we do on tomorrow's broadcast. But I do want to thank Steuben's Senior Services Fund, and we are going to have a jam-packed show, but a week with the interviews, but I wanted to have a little time to catch up because we've been so busy. So the question is, do people like Nancy Pelosi and Democrats in general have contempt for Americans who aren't part of the richest 1% or don't live on the coasts? This is a question that Joe Concha is asking. This comes after former House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, made an outrageous comment during a recent Oxford Union debate, where she talked about the populist movement as just poor souls who are looking for some answers. Listen to this. We've given answers to them. This is Nancy Pelosi. We've given answers to them, but they're blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs: guns, gays, God. Huffed Nancy Pelosi. What does that mean? That would be a woman's right to choose, and the cultural issues cloud some of their reception of an argument that really is in their interest. So you're not smart enough because of your faith or your beliefs or guns or some other boogeyman that she came up with. You're not smart enough to realize that your best interests are actually voting with Democrats. So you union workers out there who the Democrats have done a good job of exploiting throughout the years, you being a hard worker, you just don't get how helpful the Democrats are to you because you're so blinded by faith, or you're so blinded by your belief in the Constitution, your ignorant ways. Just trust Nancy Pelosi. Just trust Washington to help you, to protect you. Think of that line. We have given answers to them, but they're blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs: guns, gays, God. That would be a woman's right to choose, and the cultural issues cloud some of their reception of an argument that really is in their interest. You're just not smart enough to realize why you should be voting Democrat, folks. First of all, how condescending. Albeit not surprising, considering the elitist bubble that Pelosi, along with her husband, live in, as they have a net worth of $100 million. She's clearly saying, in other words, that if these poor souls weren't so brainwashed and would listen to the way Democrats would like them to think, they would see that the Democrat Party and its agenda is a perfect fit for them. They're just too dumb or delusional to realize it. Yeah, this goes back, you remember Barack Obama had a similar talking point back in 2008, the bitter clingers line, that they get bitter, they cling to guns or religion or apathy to people who aren't like them, or anti-immigrant sentiment or anti-trade sentiment as a way to explain their frustrations. Now, he later apologized only because there was an election to be won that year. But let's be clear, Obama meant every word, just like Nancy Pelosi meant every word. We hear this pious perspective again and again from those who claim to represent working men and women. And that's why I believe the working men and women have been leaving the Democrat Party, because of attitudes like this elitist attitude. We're going to continue this conversation. I don't want to run too late. I want to go to our last break for this hour, and then we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking, continuing this discussion. Stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. So we're talking about Nancy Pelosi saying at the Oxford Union debate that we've given answers to them, meaning people, the poor souls, as she put it, that are looking at Trump's message, essentially. But they've blocked by some of their views on guns. They have the 3 Gs: guns, gays, God. That would be a woman's right to choose, and the cultural issues cloud some of their reception of an argument that really is in their interest. So you're just not smart enough to realize. It's like what we meant when we quoted Obama with the bitter clingers, right? Clinging to your religion. Or Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables, as we all know. But make no mistake, these aren't gaffes, said Joe Conch. These aren't gaffes at all. They are pompous Democrats telling us what they truly believe of you, of the working class. The party of the little guy has become the party of coastal elites. And the numbers back it up. Of the richest 10 congressional districts in the country, all are represented by Democrats. But hey, at least the party's leader is the current president, old Scranton Joe Biden, right? Well, Scranton Joe has turned in his small town credentials for 2 multi-million-dollar homes, including one on the beach in Delaware. All of this added together, these comments, and like a viewer said during the break, how does Nancy Pelosi even have a job after scamming Americans out of millions? Oh, wait, she has deep state tenure. But you add all these things together, right? And it may be another reason why Trump is leading on average in the swing states. He connects with regular people, and that's why his speeches, again, why the media made such a bad mistake back in 2016 by showing his rallies, because it really resonated with, as he put them, the forgotten men and women out there who don't want to be lectured by Nancy Pelosi telling us that we're not smart enough to realize that we should listen to everything that she says and buy her agenda hook, line, and sinker. We're not smart enough to understand. The Democrats are the be-all, end-all. They're the cure. The sun rises and sets on the Democrats' policy. We're not smart enough to get that. But saying here, he connects with regular people, meaning Trump, especially those who feel like the Democrat Party looks down at them because maybe they own a gun or practice religion. The horror. Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, they may claim to be more caring about the plight of average Americans, the struggles of ordinary families who value their faith. Yet their words and actions say otherwise, and the perception matches reality. Democrats have a disdain for the very voters they claim to champion. In November, that perception could very well cost them the power they value most. So that's Joe Concha. But it's just yet another example of this elitist mentality. And I see that this has gotten some responses from people. I'm not going to try to read them Yes, the current government has exposed their elite for me, never for thee attitude. Yeah, it's a Washington mindset, going back to the viewer who said deep state. That's what Trump has been talking about. It's the same kind of elitist attitude that has led Trump to be in court, which we are going to talk about here. But the judge and the prosecutor. Yes, a great point on this from a viewer. Katie Couric is in that camp. Camp Superior. I like that. Camp Superior. Yes, absolutely. We're there better than you. They look down on you because you are not smart enough, because of your faith, because of your belief in the Constitution, or maybe because you don't believe in their social agenda. You're not smart enough to understand that the only thing that saves you from yourself are Democrat policies, that you need them to be your guiding light. Well, we're going to talk about other issues as well. I don't want to get on too much of a tangent here. Thank you for all the comments. Keep them coming in. Thank you for all the waves as well. Boy, we got a lot going on this morning. A lot to talk about. Coming up in a little bit, we are going to discuss the hush money trial. We haven't really touched on that this morning. Did you watch any of the coverage? Any surprises? I didn't really see any surprises. We've got a few things here about the Biden administration in general. A couple things here about Trump. I know I posed a question yesterday, but isn't it getting interesting? It's almost like I'm not going to say a test, but everybody's vying to go to the court, going to court with Trump that are in the VP nod. Like the Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, is going to be at the court today. J.D. Vance was yesterday. Who else? Doug Burgum was at that rally. Tim Scott, I think, is scheduled to appear at the court as well. So it's I don't know, it's just interesting. And I know I pose this question nearly every day, but who would you like to see get the VP nod from the president, the former president, Donald Trump? There's a lot of good names out there. I think it is interesting that Doug Burgum got to speak at the rally. That was a big one, 100,000 people in New Jersey. So I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. I do have a quick thing here about our current vice president that we'll get to as well. So keep those comments coming in, because it's amazing. 1 hour down. How fast does this program go, folks? How did we ever only do this for 1 hour? 2 hours is starting to run a little short on time, if you ask me. But thank you so much for joining us this morning. We got to take a short break, and then we kick off hour number 2 in mere moments. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. Thank you so much for joining us here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. A comment from a viewer. I saw a list of increases on everything from food, gas, everything. It's gone up more than 13%. How can they say the rate of inflation is as low as they claim? I'm not that good at math, but it should be at least 13%. Well, that's the way, obviously, they manipulate the numbers. Sometimes they won't include food and, basically the things that you need to survive. I don't believe the numbers. I know what it feels like when I put my debit card in the machine at the grocery store and what the receipt prints out. I know that feeling. What is it with, and this was a trend a while ago, it seems to be making a comeback. The Democrat Party, and I know Biden used to do it, some other, I don't know if they think it makes them hip or something, but this cussing all the time. Did you see that Kamala dropped a bad one during the event live streamed by the White House? We have to know that sometimes people open the door for you and leave it open, she said at the summit. Sometimes they won't, and then you need to kick that blanking door down. Then she said, "Excuse my language," as the audience laughed. I don't know. I don't know if it's because instantly it was so cool, it was so hip. Jimmy O Yang, an actor or something, said, "Oh, we got to make that a T-shirt with that saying." I don't know. I guess it makes them cool. That was just in passing. I saw that, and I'm hoping that's not a regular trend, but I guess it will be. Hey, did you see that Jen Psaki, who somehow has a job in the mainstream media, even though Ronna McDaniel does not? Anyway, ex-White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki is being forced to retract a false claim in her new book That claim that President Biden did not check his watch during the dignified transfer of 13 U.S. troops killed in the Afghanistan withdrawal. In her May 2024 book, coming out soon if it's not already, called Say More, Psaki attacked her former boss's critics, who she said seized on the callous moment to make, quote, him appear insensitive, concerned only about how much time had passed, claiming he only looked at his watch after the ceremony had ended. So she's still doing a very good job, even though she's not press secretary anymore, still finding a way to lie for her boss, to protect her boss. Very impressive. No, but remember, Ronna McDaniel was not allowed to be on NBC because she worked for Trump. But Psaki can push lies and it's okay. She's still very much employed. Axios first reported, which is interesting because Axios is far left, on the book's inaccuracies. Photos, videos, and the media fact checkers at the time of the ceremony had already confirmed Biden's heartless actions. And you recall, it was a major conversation. Of course he checked his watch. And for her to now try to rewrite history is very telling of who they are. Psaki later acknowledged to Axios that the detail in a few lines of the book about the exact number of times he looked at his watch will be removed in future reprints and the ebook, without commenting on the inaccuracies or making any kind of apologies. The story of Afghanistan is really about the importance of delivering feedback, even when it's difficult, told through my own experience by telling President Biden that his own story of loss was not well received by the families who were grieving their sons and daughters. Now, a press rep for the agency that published the White House tell-all confirmed to the Post that the text will be corrected in the ebook and future printings due to inaccuracies as originally written. Now, 6 Gold Star families, in an exclusive interview with the New York Post on Monday, had demanded a retraction and an apology from Psaki for inaccurately writing that the highly watched moment was nothing more than misinformation. Yes, she was trying to she was trying to push propaganda. Again, sadly, on the backs of these soldiers that were lost. This in Afghanistan was a disaster for Biden, and for her to try to rewrite history in this way. It needs to be removed, said Darren Hoover, whose son, Marine Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, was killed in the blast from an ISIS-K suicide bombing in Kabul. To go out and put this in the book and memorialize it for all to see is nothing so short of disgusting. I mean, it's reprehensible to me, Hoover said. Coral Brazino, the mother of Marine Corporal Humberto Sanchez, said, "We are not liars. We're just seeking for justice for our kids. And we're not trying to make this up. We're not trying to make anybody look bad. We don't care if it was Trump or if it was Biden." Saying it had shown disrespect for our families, for our loved ones, and for the people that died for this country. Reps for MSNBC said, and that's where Jen Psaki is a host of Inside with Jen Psaki. After leaving her $180,000 per year role at the White House, MSNBC did not immediately respond to a request for comment. But again, Ronna McDaniels was a bridge too far. She can't be on NBC, but Psaki's still gainfully employed at MSNBC. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all the exact quotes. Just something that I found interesting, and unfortunately, you will not see too many outlets. You will not see this reported on MSNBC or NBC, I'm sure. Representative Daryl Issa said Jen Psaki is still cleaning up on aisle Biden, but this was a lie too far. White House apologists have never told the truth about their Afghanistan debacle, but here's hoping overdue accountability is on its way. Well, I'm glad she was called out. I'm glad she was forced to correct it. It's a shame that she didn't release an apology and found almost responding that it was an inconvenience in some ways, the way she represented that. Okay, but yeah, we have a couple quick things to get to. Just jumping around. We are going to talk about Michael Cohen. You know, going back to just quickly, we're talking about Nancy Pelosi and looking down at working class Americans, and we've seen it from Obama in the past and Biden, et cetera. Isn't this interesting that it's not just, by the way, Democrats? Very often you see this kind of, the Liz Cheneys of the world, the Republicans that want to get attention by bad-mouthing Republicans. This is an interesting one, though, at MSNBC. And I'm going to talk about this in just a moment. I was trying to find out if I had the exact, do I have the exact name right? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing this live on the air. My apologies. But Claire McCaskill, remember Claire McCaskill? She was a senator from Missouri from 2007 to 2019. Now, I'm trying to remember, what was her claim to fame? Anyway, she was a Democrat. So it's not, I'm just saying there's not just, it seems to be typically a Democrats here. And I'm rambling on a little bit, but she was on MSNBC on Deadline. And this kind of ties in with what Nancy Pelosi has said, what Obama had said in the past, Hillary Clinton. McCaskill said, yeah, and there are so many things that are weird about the people who have this undying loyalty to Donald Trump. There is two categories. There's a category of the cowardly Republicans who are afraid not to be for Donald Trump publicly, even though behind his back, they think he's a horrible person, a horrible leader, and a horrible, horrible president. Then there's the bucket of people who really believe in this guy. Bucket, very similar to basket of deplorables. Bucket of deplorables. So this is Claire McCaskill, Democrat, former governor, former senator, a whole bunch of things. Do you like and do you believe this? I want to pose this question to you. Do you believe, especially Claire McCaskill, she has Republicans coming up to her and going, boy, I've got to support Trump because I want to be popular, but I can't stand him. He's a horrible, horrible president. Just a bad guy. Do you ever notice how they push that lie and that narrative that every Republican in Washington that supports Trump doesn't really like Trump? They think he's a horrible president. He would be a horrible president again. But they have to because they're cowardly. They have to support him. But behind closed doors, everybody's telling me. Now, yes, I do believe the Liz Cheneys of the world are pretty outspoken about their dislike for Trump, but they're not supporting him either. So there's two kind of people, the cowardly Republicans who think he's a horrible president but don't dare say so. And then there's the bucket of people, some of you may be in that bucket, who really believe in this guy. And they said, well, who's that bucket? She said the people at his rallies. So Nicole Wallace, the host, actually has to say, you mean supporters? Yeah. She can't call them supporters. They have to call them buckets of people. That's what they think of you. And I should have piggybacked this off of the Nancy Pelosi piece, but I had it in a different stack of papers because I was bringing it up for a different reason. But this is what McCaskill said. It's more probably than 30% of the GOP. It's more probably than 30% of the GOP. It's probably 25% of the country, that believe that his stuff, they believe what he says. They actually think he's a good businessman. I mean, this is one of the worst businessmen ever in the history of the planet. Very brilliant statement. Not a lot of hyperbole or anything. Very brilliant statement by Claire McCaskill. Let me just reread it because she already called many people that watch this show perhaps a bucket of people who really believe in this guy. I mean, this is one of the worst businessmen ever in the history of the planet. Doesn't this sound like a teenager talking about like their favorite band or something? Anyway, I don't know ever if he's totally ever been. You would know better than I would. But it doesn't look like he's ever actually been flush. It always looks like he's been this close to debt, outweighing assets for most of his life, adult life. But these folks think, oh, he'll be a great president because he's such a good businessman. So are you in that bucket? Claire McCaskill, very similar to what Nancy Pelosi is saying. This is what they think about the quote unquote forgotten men and women that Donald Trump talks so often about. And that's why I think it's interesting. Donald Trump, he recognizes what they think of his supporters. He recognizes, and that's why he does such a good job at the rallies to speaking to them. Not Claire McCaskill with brilliant sentences. Such as, I mean, this is one of the worst businessmen ever in the history of the planet. And then calling people a bucket of people. But that's Claire McCaskill is smarter than you. And you just don't understand why you should support what she supports, just like Nancy Pelosi. We've got to take another short break. Well, not another. It's the first one of the 2 o'clock, the second hour, not 2 o'clock hour. The second hour of Frankly Speaking. Keep those comments coming in. I see a lot coming through, a lot of waves. Thank you very much. Did I hit those other waves or those two people that walked by? Either way. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. It's getting hectic. We have so much to talk about. Stay with us. are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. We've got a lot of comments to get to from viewers. Ready? Kind of proves what side NBC is on. I think we all knew it, but it's disgusting. Yes, in reference to Ronna McDaniels being booted, but Jen Psaki having no problem pushing, well, in that case, lie, propaganda about President Biden, in her words, not checking his watch during the ceremony of bringing back the those we lost in Afghanistan, the soldiers that we lost, when clearly even Axios, of all places, reported on it saying, look, this is a lie. Our next comment from a viewer. This is from Ken. Thank you, Ken. The Republicans rushed to kick out a lying Congressman Santos, which reduced the House majority. The Dems slow walk the trial of a corrupt senator, Bob Goldbar Menendez, which would even out the Senate. Who's smarter? I've got to agree, Ken. I was not of the mindset that was a good move about Santos. I did not like Santos. I did think, like you said, it was a liar. But we don't always think like Democrats. Democrats, yeah, slow walking. What happened with Bob Menendez. By the way, speaking of that, let me go to a few more comments. Thank you for your patriotism, Frank. We'll be listening to you a lot more. I'm glad you're on the side of right and the truth. Well, thank you. Isn't that kind? Thank you for that comment. If you're new to the program, saying that you're going to watch more, compliments always gets you right on the air. Those comments go right to the top. So thank you very much. No jurors were chosen on the first day of the New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez federal corruption trial. Not a single juror was chosen yesterday in the federal corruption case. The veteran Democrat, wearing a suit with a red tie and a Senate pin on his lapel, sat quietly in the courtroom, only speaking with his lawyers or reading from time to time during the first day of trial, which ended with dozens of potential jurors being dismissed. I wonder if they'll start rushing it through like they did with Trump, where, never mind, we're just going to take everybody. Now, Judge Sidney Stein excused over 3 dozen prospective jurors following 3 hours of questioning them individually with prosecutors and lawyers for the Menendez trial. Okay. When the possible panelists were brought in, Stein informed them the trial involves a sitting U.S. senator from the state of New Jersey who allegedly agreed to accept bribes. He also told them the trial was slated to last up to 7 weeks until about the 4th of July, prompting many to raise their hand and inform the judge they couldn't serve for such a long period of time. Anyway, you get the idea. We've talked about what is being alleged there. Boy, it looks like did he end up, remember I had that story for you. It looked like he threw his wife under the bus at one point. Anyway, but I would agree with you, Ken. We did not make the right move in that decision. Well, I have a couple more things here about Biden, if you don't mind. And we'll get to Trump and the trial. Leaders on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border are cracking down on illegal immigration as a way to score political points ahead of the upcoming presidential elections. That's according to a source with the New York Post. Mexican President Manuel Lopez Obrador and President Joe Biden spoke on April 28th and agreed to take swift action to, quote, immediately implement concrete measures on border matters. Following the call, the Biden administration rolled out new restrictions for asylum interviews taking place at the southern border, which would allow officers to quickly remove migrants who don't prove that they have a credible fear of returning home. So do you notice how, well, obviously it's too little too late, but it may work with some voters. Isn't it interesting the things that the American people demanded for the last 3.5 years? The president doesn't take seriously until it's election time, and he realized how down in the polls he is and how many votes he's hemorrhaging from within his own party, with young people calling him Genocide Joe, this anti-Semitic strain, so he's caving on his rally policy, which is sickening. He's doing everything he can, buying college educations, which I don't actually think helps in this situation. Because imagine, if you will, to sound like the Twilight Zone, you're watching these protests. You're watching these kids rip up their diplomas during graduations. You're seeing the temper tantrums. You're seeing their threats against Jewish students or threats against the janitorial staff. You see this and you go, what is this world coming to? And then you're told that you as a taxpayer have to pay for those kids' education? That Biden's going to erase their debt? I don't know. Maybe it works. But then now he's going to be tough. He's going to be tough on the border. Former Yuma Sector Chief Border Patrol Agent Chris Clem feels like these measures are 3.5 years too late and notes that the timing is geared to supporting the Biden administration and its re-election bid. This too little, too late strategy is not good. I also don't see it as being sustained if Biden remains in office. It will likely be turned off as quickly as they are trying to turn it on. That's what makes it so pathetic. It's so clearly done for political purposes, just like his change in Israeli policy. It's nothing new under the sun. But he's trying to do everything because the swing state numbers, wow. What Biden or Trump led in 5 of the 6 swing states. I've got another thing on illegal border crossing that I think you're going to find very interesting that's not being reported elsewhere. Well, it is in the New York Post, but we've talked about the real credible fear of terrorists having crossed the border and what this can lead to. It's scary. It's something the media doesn't want to talk about because they don't want to put a magnifying glass on the open, porous border that Biden has created. Well, we've got kind of an example of this that you're not hearing elsewhere. So stay with us. We got to take a short break. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Our beautiful view overlooking Market Street. Thank you for joining us this morning on Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. So we've talked about the real serious threat of a potential terrorist crossing the open, porous borders. Well, Todd Bensman has a piece of the New York Post, and in the early morning of May the 3rd, 2 men in a box truck pulled up to the front gate of Quantico Marine Corps Base, 35 miles southwest of Washington, and tried to lie their way in, claiming they were Amazon delivery men. After skeptical military police channeled them to an area for secondary security inspection, the driver hit the gas in defiance of haul orders and tried to barrel the truck into the base's town center. Now, quick-thinking MPs put up road barriers to stop the truck. The Marines ended up citing the 2 for trespassing on federal property. We only know this. You haven't seen this on the mainstream media, right? You haven't seen this mentioned on the legacy media. The only reason we know this is because there was a local news organization founded in 2010 to, quote, help people understand what is happening in their local communities in Northern Virginia. Yet while reporter Kelly Sinkowski, who broke what happened, focuses on her local readership, she's shocked this story hasn't gotten more national attention. Her story quoted a prepared email statement from base spokesperson Captain Michael Curtis, confirming the incident's basic contours, but no more. But when the reporter kept pressing, she cited multiple anonymous sources who told her that one of the 2 individuals in the truck was a Jordanian foreign national who recently crossed the southern border into the U.S., and also that one of the people in the truck, they didn't say which one, is on the U.S. terrorist watch list. After citing the 2 men for trespassing, the Marine Corps turned them over to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The big question in the room that's gone unanswered for more than a week after Sinkowski reported the story is, of course, this one. Did illegal border crossers from the Middle East just try to attack a U.S. military base? Now, many more questions deserve answers too, but the federal government has gone mum. Have U.S. investigators ruled out a terrorism motive? Do U.S. counterterrorism agencies even want to know? And is anyone even investigating that question? Were there any weapons in the truck or on the illegal immigrants it carried? Was the truck itself the weapon? When and how exactly did the men enter the United States? Was the Jordanian a Palestinian Arab from Gaza and angry about U.S. support for Israel's retaliatory war? Many Palestinians hold Jordanian passports. Did an overwhelmed Border Patrol agent accidentally release one of the FBI terrorist watch list? It wouldn't be the first time. What has ICE done with this pair since the MPs turned them over? I emailed Sinkowski to ask about what she's learned in the week since her incursion story published. Not much. No one will tell her anything more, and no bigger media outlets have joined her lonely quest. A local mom living in Northern Virginia who had no previous formal journalism background, Sinkowski took a few minutes out to chat with Todd Bensman. She said she pursued the story after seeing a comment on social media, published what she could find out, and it was fought a very lonely battle for more answers. No one will tell her, especially not the U.S. Marine Corps nor ICE. What really blows my mind is that no other media has followed up on this story after a whole week has passed. We need more transparency in how our border problems are impacting national security through localized incidents like this one. I thought that was fascinating and something you're not hearing elsewhere, exactly what she's saying. So we got a little time here. We're going to talk about Trump here in just a second. Now, the question was asked by, who wrote this originally? I don't know if it doesn't have a name on it the way this is printed. Okay, the New York Times. This was by the New York Times. Biden promised normal. Do voters want his version of it? Do you feel, let me ask, to just paraphrase or maybe change what their question is in the New York Times. Do you feel this is a normal? Because it feels, unfortunately, like the new normal, which is not a good thing. Is it normal to have wars raging everywhere, being on the brink of the world being on fire, if it's not already? The threats of China, Iran, Russia, inflation, back here at home, the divide in this country. Is that what has been suggested would be the normal? Because I remember the peace and prosperity during the Trump administration. I remember that. I remember my bank account doing a lot better. I remember not worrying about constant wars. I remember that. That seemed kind of normal. Is this the new normal? President Biden has argued for years that he is the politician to restore normalcy to American politics. But for almost as long, a subject of American voters, frustrated by everything from the economy to immigration policy, have argued that they do not want his version of it. That's another great point, one I didn't even mention. The immigration, the open borders, the list can go on and on. The latest New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, Siena College poll in battleground states, released just yesterday, showed that most voters still wanted to bring politics in Washington back to normal, but nearly 70% of voters said the country's political and economic systems needed major changes or to be completely torn down. And few believe that Mr. Biden would make even minor changes that would be good for the country. Well, I hope we're not talking about tearing down our political system, but I mean, if you look at what we're seeing on college campuses, that probably is that group's mindset. The view from the Biden campaign is this: there is still time to sell Mr. Biden's economic and policy accomplishments, and officials are working to connect with the voters who will decide the election. There is still time to draw a character contrast between Biden and his predecessor and challenger Donald Trump. And they argue Mr. Biden is not satisfied with business as usual either. The campaign is not arguing for the status quo. The most important piece is acknowledging that people are still feeling frustrated and behind, and that the problems and the struggles that people are facing were not caused by this president and, in fact, have been alleviated. Oh, okay, so it was actually Trump that is causing us to have this issue right now. Interesting. Recent polling has been consistent enough to reflect widespread discontent with both candidates. Mr. Biden's handling of the Gaza war has been deeply unpopular among young, black, and Hispanic voters, whose frustration, if it continues, could unravel the president's Democratic coalition. The polling has been more frustrating to Mr. Biden and his advisors, than they have acknowledged publicly, according to several people in his orbit who asked to speak on the condition of anonymity. But they say the bright spot is Mr. Trump's unpredictability and dark messaging on matters ranging from the economy to immigration may not win him new voters. It's hard for Donald Trump to win more voters than we're seeing in the polls. Anyway, you get the idea. Now, Frank Luntz, a veteran Republican pollster, said their idea of normalcy is represent me like I deserve to be represented. Hear me like I deserve to be heard. Fight for me like I deserve to be fought for. In other words, he added, say what you mean what you say, do what you say, get it done, as we saw from the Trump administration. But now we see President Biden doing everything he can to try to help his numbers as we get closer to November, try to do something on the border, which is too little too late. Try to continue to put that messaging out there that no, never mind what is happening at the grocery store and what your bank account looks like right now. Things are great. Things are really going well. So the polls, again, not looking good for the current president, but also just kind of, I got distracted. Not looking great for the current president, but they are going to try to do everything they can to buy votes, as we saw with the college, of changing changing the marijuana laws, a lot of things. He's going to try no holds barred here at the end as we near 6 months out about the presidential election. We've got to take a short break. As I had mentioned earlier, the Stu Benz Senior Services Fund interview section of the program, I do not have a guest this morning because we had so much to catch up on. I do appreciate Stu Benz Senior Services Fund for being a part of the program, and we will have guests throughout the week, and they will be a part of that, but we always thank them. Also, if you are new to the program, we are now 2 hours long. We begin at 6 a.m., and you see the number on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to weigh in on the topics of the day or any issue that you'd like to discuss. I know there's a lot going on. We haven't even talked about the Trump trial yet, which we will when we come back, and a couple things here about the presidential race and a few other things here if we get a chance, just kind of a hodgepodge of stories. I keep asking the question, do you have a favorite? If you were a betting person, do you have a favorite for VP? A lot of names being thrown around. A lot of the VP, potential VPs for Trump are showing up at the trial, showing up at rallies. So what do you think? Who would you like to see? Now, we have to take a break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom, as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio on Market Street in Corning. So prosecution is seeking to land the case today as Cohen cross-examination looms. Stephen Collinson at CNN said prosecutors will seek to build on his testimony, meaning Cohen's, when he returns to the stand today to nail down their case that the ex-president broke the law by falsifying financial records to hide the payoff and the culmination of a scheme to mislead voters. And that will be a curtain raiser for what is looming as a savage cross-examination by the presumptive Republican nominee's attorney designed to shatter the reputation of Cohen, expose him as a liar, and punish him for turning on his ex-boss. The biggest question before Monday was whether prosecutors had laid a prior foundation of corroborating evidence to which they could connect Cohen's testimony and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Trump acted criminally. You'll never believe it. CNN believes that they did it, that Cohen did it. I think they have it. See, it doesn't matter what precedent this sets for the future of this country, what this will do to weaponize the judicial system against your perceived political enemies. Those in the media don't care. Those on the left don't care because they believe they are winning. They believe they are using it to their advantage. So at the end of the day, it was all worth it. The ends justify the means. Never mind what precedent this sets for the country. It has been said time and time again that there is no case here. And Stormy Daniels' testimony really there just to embarrass Trump, to humiliate Trump is another form of punishment in all this. But the media is more than willing to do the dirty work here and keep pushing the idea that Trump's really losing on this one. The walls are closing in, as we've heard for the last how many ever years. Takeaways from the first day of Michael Cohen's testimony in the Trump hush money case. Cohen ties Trump to the Daniels hush money payment. Okay. Cohen ties the hush money reimbursement to Trump, too. Cohen describes being Trump's protector. This guy has a weird ego, doesn't he? He's kind of that pathetic guy that never could quite make it, but brags himself up a lot. No fireworks in Trump-Cohen showdown, and Trump's entourage grows for Cohen's testimony. Yes, that's one of the big issues, one of the big topics they're discussing. A lot of the VP potential VPs are showing up at the trial for support. Trump's son, Eric Trump, his senior advisor, Susie Wiles, and Senator Rick Scott of Florida all appeared in the gallery behind the former president. On Monday, Trump had his biggest entourage. Senators J.D. Vance of Ohio and Tommy Tuberville of Alabama were in court, as was New York Representative Nicole Malliotakis from Trump-friendly Staten Island and the attorneys generals of Alabama and Iowa. They joined Trump for the high-profile Cohen testimony, sitting in the gallery behind the former president at the defendant's table. Eric Trump and attorney Alina Habba were also there to support Trump. But yes, if you go to CNN and elsewhere, it's over. Hey, Michael Cohen takes Trump trial past this critical threshold. Michael Cohen, it says here, one-time lawyer and fixer, faced the man he simply called boss as he began testifying in the Manhattan Trump trial. It was the most important day yet, and what had already shaped up as a trial of the century. Wow, trial of the century? As we began his keenly anticipated appearance Monday, I think he exceeded expectations in how he presented to the jury, at least so far. That's no accident. The district attorney's office had methodically bolstered Cohen's testimony beforehand with a series of credible witnesses and corroborating documents, gradually narrowing the universe of uncorroborated evidence that Cohen would need to provide. And they continued that with their handling of Cohen in the first day on the stand. Both Assistant District Attorneys Susan Hoffinger and Cohen carefully stepped through the origins of the Cohen-Trump relationship, blah, blah, blah. So yes, we knew what would be said about Cohen's testimony, that it was going to be groundbreaking. I didn't know they were calling this the trial of the century. Kind of early in the century, isn't it? I guess not. Okay, here's a couple comments from viewers. Whoever is a VP pick, I only hope is not a rat or a mole. Okay, that's fair. I'm thinking perhaps we haven't seen the VP pick yet. Trump works in mysterious ways. That's a very good point, and I've said that to a few people. I know we've had a lot of viewers say that too, that it could be someone so completely out of left field, I don't mean politically, but out of nowhere, that would not surprise me. If we see these names being thrown around, the J.D. Vances, the Tim Scotts, Kristi Noem at one point, all these names, I don't have to go through all of them. If at the end of the day, when the smoke clears, it's someone that we aren't that familiar with or haven't been inundated with, if you will, that they could be a VP nod, I think you have a point there. Now, at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe it will be one of the favorites. But to me, it's kind of interesting to think that it could be, because Mike Pence was a long shot, for lack of a better word. I don't think too many people expected Mike Pence to get the nod. So could it be a Mike Pence scenario? Now, I don't mean personality or politics. I'm just saying out of nowhere, a Sarah Palin scenario. It'll be interesting. So Jonathan Turley has a piece and Greg Jarrett has a piece, both talking about the job that Cohen did yesterday. I did want to mention this since we're talking about the VP before we go to break. Donald Trump arrived at the courthouse, that on Monday, with his entourage, and a notable addition, J.D. Vance was there. Vance isn't the only one eyeing the trial that could be a potential running mate. Senator Tim Scott's team, after Rick Scott dropped by the trial last week, had discussions about going to the courthouse to show support, according to one person familiar with the situation. While it's unclear whether Scott will ultimately attend, he will be in New York today for a Trump fundraiser. The conversations and Vance's appearance reflects the way the trial is emerging as yet another litmus test for would-be running mates. Is it a litmus test? I think that's a little bit maybe misuse of that word. Vance's appearance, one person close to him said, wasn't politically motivated, but it clearly would boost his odds, especially given he was the first prominent member of the VP shortlist to make the trip. He's also live tweeting the proceedings with posts that sound likely to please a certain reader. One contrasts the splendor of Trump Tower with a dingy courtroom, for example, and accuses the DA of engaging in psychological torture. All very interesting stuff. All right, we got to take a short break. Stay with us. When we come back, we're going to see what Jonathan Turley had to say about yesterday's hearing. I do think Jonathan Turley does a fantastic job at the New York Post, so we're going to talk about his take on it and a little bit here about Greg Jarrett, what he felt as well. Then we're going to go through a couple of quick things as we wrap up. Stay with us. Oh, wait, hey, one more comment from a viewer since I just saw this. Pence, when he showed his true colors, really blew my mind. Pence, it seemed to me like Pence had the potential of being president after Trump if Trump were to win re-election this last go around or this. It's interesting the direction Pence has went since the election. I know it has turned a lot of Republicans off. So good point. Thank you. Just say no to Haley and Gabbard. Oh, okay. Interesting. Another viewer says, I get Nikki Haley. Why Tulsi Gabbard? And the reason I ask that is it because she was a Democrat and you feel that she's kind of a wolf in sheep clothing? This is not a bias or loaded question that I'm asking you. I really want to get to the bottom of why some people really love Tulsi Gabbard and some people can't stand her as Trump's VP pick. And I wouldn't say I have a strong stance either way, though I think it is always a little bit troubling when you're talking about picking a former Democrat. But, You know, Trump was a former Democrat at one point, or was a Democrat at one point, now former Democrat. I don't know. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't seem to bother me as much as, well, like a Nikki Haley would. So keep those comments coming in. Now we're going to take that break. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So Jonathan Turley says Michael Cohen apparently wants a reality show. But if his testimony yesterday is any indication, reality is about to sink in for not just Cohen, but the prosecutors and the court. In stoking interest in his own appearance, the former Trump counsel promised the public that they should be, quote, prepared to be surprised. Thus far, however, Cohen has offered nothing new and, more importantly, nothing to make the case for Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. Just before he took the stand, the New York Post revealed that Cohen has been peddling a reality show called The Fixer, including working with a person who helped create Joe Exotic. Remember that? Whereland appears interested to stay within that genre. Can you, the Fixer, he is so full of himself and he's just not that smart. We've seen that time and time again. I thought it was great what Hope Hicks had to say, that if he was a fixer, it's because he originally broke it. Anyway, the Cohen pitch came with a cheesy promo video where he promised viewers, I am your fixer. His first post-Trump client, Bragg, may have to disagree. Cohen had only one advantage for Bragg: his notoriously flexible morals and ethics, which allows him to say most anything to support his sponsors. With the prosecution's case almost over, Bragg needed Cohen to clearly state that Trump intentionally committed fraud to conceal some still poorly defined crime. The problem is that Cohen only confirmed that Trump knew he was going to pay for the non-disclosure agreement and that it would be buried before the election. None of that is unlawful. Anyway, now he says about this reality show. On his reality show promo, Cohen tells viewers that he is now there to fix their problems because the little guy doesn't usually have access to people with my particular set of skills. Those skills seem to have escaped all of the witnesses who were compelled to work with him. Witnesses detailed how Cohen was ridiculed as someone prone to exaggeration and unprofessional. Former Trump associate Hope Hicks said that Cohen was constantly trying to insinuate himself into the campaign and that he used to like to call himself Mr. Fix-It, but it was only because he first broke it. Cohen only succeeded in confirming that he put together this payment and advised Trump to go forward with it. He assured him that it would effectively kill the story before the election. None of that is illegal. The Fix-It man assured Trump that he fixed it and now wants Trump to go to jail for following that advice. In the course of that representation, Cohen also admitted to taping his client without his knowledge, a breathtaking breach of trust and confidentiality. This is the man who, according to Stormy Daniels' attorney, expected to be Trump's attorney general. Davidson said that Cohen was depressed and despondent, and I thought he was going to kill himself when he realized that he would not be made a cabinet member. Cohen contradicted Davidson and insisted that he only wanted to be Trump's personal lawyer. He also admitted that he was unaware that the publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, had long killed negative stories about Trump and other celebrities for decades. Cohen has yet to fix the problem for Bragg. More importantly, he has added to the problem for Judge Merchant. Many of us have ridiculed this case as devoid of any criminal act. Indeed, Merchant has allowed the prosecutors to proceed without clearly stating what crime has been committed. It is not even clear why paying one's lawyer a lump sum for his services and costs, including the NDA payment, was not a legal expense or how it was supposed to be entered on a business ledger. Absent a sudden epiphany, in his final testimony on Tuesday, Merchant should rule in favor of a directed verdict. That is, throwing the case out before it goes to jury. If he instead sends this farcical case to the jury, it is Merchant, not Cohen, who may have a better claim to a reality show as the ultimate fix-it man. All right, we got to take another short break. Then we're going to read some comments. The last break of today's edition of Frankly Speaking, so stay with us. And we are back. A couple comments from viewers as we wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. First up, Trump's one weakness was his judge of character. He trusted the wrong people or was misled by those he did trust. I don't think that'll happen again. At least I hope not. And there's been a lot of conversation about that around some of the people he had, especially in his cabinet and the likes. Frank, the Dems and legacy media know that the Dems' policies are not popular or sustainable, so they can't win on the issues. They work to get their candidates elected by counting on the already indoctrinated sheeple and anyone else that they can shame into voting for them. Thank you, Ken. That's very often why, and it's the old line that Democrats run as conservatives around election time because it's the only way they can get elected. Now, in Fox News, Greg Jarrett says that Michael Cohen's lies, and more lies could sink Bragg's case. And it gets a little bit into the weeds here, and I don't want to get into all that. But former FEC chairman Bradley Smith put it this way in the column on the Wall Street Journal. The crime that Mr. Bragg claims is being covered up isn't a crime at all. Even if the DA's warped legal theory proceeds, he must still prove that Trump himself understood campaign finance laws and deliberately intended to violate them. There's no evidence of that. Even experienced candidates struggle to comprehend the mind-numbing web of campaign regulations. That's why they depend on lawyers. Yes, even at a local level, people don't realize how difficult it is. Bragg wants to put Trump in prison for relying on the advice of his legal counsel. There's a legal term for that. Nutty. On cross-examination, Cohen will surely be confronted with his myriad of lies, which I have recounted in earlier columns. One in particular is worth remembering. In February of 2018, he told the New York Times that the payment to Ms. Clifford was lawful and was not a campaign contribution or campaign expenditure. Shortly thereafter, Cohen changed his tune. It's changing still. When he retakes the witness stand on Tuesday, he'll regurgitate more lies and misinformation. None of it's worth a darn because Cohen represents the quintessential liar's paradox. He's told so many fibs that even his recantations are self-contradictory. In the trial at hand, Cohen has a personal interest in lying. It's hatred and greed. When he isn't trolling for dollars on TikTok by trashing Trump, he's gawking at a proposed reality show that he calls The Fixer. Cohen needs to fix himself. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg knows that he is teetering dangerously close to subpoenaing or to getting perjury, but he's wholly committed to convicting Trump for crimes not committed or fully revealed. By calling Cohen as his star witness, the DA has forsaken his duty to seek the truth. He is aiding and abetting a convicted perjurer by enabling more lies. This is the worst kind of government corruption: unscrupulous, dishonest, and amoral. It is antithetical for justice and an embarrassment to our once respected legal system. It's not a paradox, it's a tragedy. That's from Greg Jarrett. I thought that was a really good point. And the precedent this sets is terrifying, but they don't care because it's just like Fareed Zakaria said on CNN. It's all about Trump. The only reason this is a case is because of Donald Trump. It wouldn't be for anybody else. Kathy Hochul will say, no, business people, don't get worried. This is just a one and done because it's Trump. George Conway, who hates Trump, who I think is a very despicable human being, what he did to his wife at the time, Kellyanne Conway, continuing to badmouth her boss and really making her look bad. I can't stand this guy, but I want to mention because he's on CNN. He said, they're all working off the same talking points. They're saying exactly the same thing. And the fact of the matter is, I want to make a political point here. I've already made the legal point. The politicians can point here is that, this is terrible. It says it is designed to keep him off the campaign trail. Well, actually, if you look at it politically, in my judgment, this is helping him politically in the following sense. It is keeping him from being on television saying all the crazy things like in Wildwood the other day. That show in Wildwood, I wish it had been broadcast on this network and all the other networks so everyone could see how crazy he is. This is why George Conway thinks he's smarter than he is. He very much reminds me of Cohen. Because he doesn't see, like the others in the media did, that by showing these rallies, it only helped Trump. That's why there was 100,000 people there at the Jersey rally. Because what he doesn't understand is Trump's message resonates with people. So he's going down that old failed policies. I wish everybody would have to watch it. But he thinks it helps him politically, this trial. So, I think that'll change if there's a jury conviction here, but I think it's not necessarily hurting him politically at this moment, at this time. Okay. Trump accused the trial judge of being corrupt and conflicted on his way out of court yesterday. He called Merchant, who was first appointed to the bench in 2006, highly conflicted. He also said there's no problem here and there's no crime in this case. It's really a sad day for the country. It's a sad day for New York, he told reporters. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Boy, that went quick. Thank you to everybody who joined us. We're going to have a lot of fun on the program tomorrow, so please join us as well. As always, if there's something I missed, you can reach out after the program. You see the number on the bottom of your screen, 607-358-3131. Reach out and let me know maybe if there's a topic you want me to discuss, something you want to bring up. by all means, it's a 24/7 hotline. You can text or leave a voicemail at any time. Have a great day. Please join us tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone.